everyone, Corey from Aquarium Co-op. Today I've got a unique fish room, 2,800 gallons of water, but only 6 tanks. That means giant tanks, so stay tuned. Capote Mel's fish room, and we'll put a link down below for that so you can check out more of this stuff in depth. But we're going to go through and we're going to get started, but something like this right here, 1,000 gallons. So here's one of the rooms in the fish room. When you do tanks so big that you only own 6 tanks and they're 2,800 gallons, pretty soon it takes multiple rooms. So we're going to ask Mel, let's start with like this one here, and this is the side shot. So how big is this tank and what are the dimensions? Normally I don't ask dimensions, but all these tanks are so big and different that you can't see it on film without knowing it.
Yeah, this is 600 gallons. It's 4 feet wide,
okay, so
8 feet long,
yep,
and 2.5 feet tall.
Okay. And I know there's some history. How old is this tank? How long have you had this one roughly?
These two 600 gallons in this room were built for me locally in 1990, so 26 years.
Wow, they've held up well.
Yeah, they've held up real well. Luckily, they're in the basement, so if an issue happened, it would just be on cement, but I think my wife would still be a little unhappy if that happened, but I figure if they haven't leaked in 26 years, I'm probably good, huh? I
would say so. I think, I wouldn't move them, but I think they're good for where they are.
Yeah.
So what fish are in here, and kind of tell us about, at 26 years, what has this tank done? Like, I mean, has it done a million things or just one thing?
It's actually, until the last year or so, this was what housed my dovai.
Okay.
This was the first big tank that I got when I moved into this house, and it was constructed specifically for a pair of Costa Rican dovai. To which I spawned and spawned and spawned. I would guesstimate that there's probably 100,000 dovais that have come from this tank.
That's how I didn't know you existed until I saw videos of it, and I'm like, wow, he's in Seattle. Like that's close to me. This guy's got monster tanks. I didn't know who he was until I found you through a dovai. So
yeah. So, unfortunately, my last big male dovai passed away. Well, I still have, as we'll see in the other tank, there's a significant size one in there, but he's not in at all what this guy was in here. But the last one I had, I think I've went through, my memories. I've kept dovai since 1974.
Oh,
so,
wow, yeah.
My original house, I had a 240, which we talked about, that also was specifically made for dovai. I soon found out that wasn't big enough. A pair of dovai, a full-size pair of dovai, an 8-foot by 2-foot tank isn't going to cut it.
Not when they're 24 inches or bigger.
Not when they're full size.
Yeah.
But I raised my first pair in that tank. And then when we moved into this house, I realized I wanted to keep with dovai. It's an amazing fish. If you haven't had a dovai, you just don't understand how interactive they can be.
I just got my first one at home, and he's still at 2 inches. So like literally a month ago, because I've sold them, and I've watched people keep them, and I've always said, well, I don't have the room to keep one. I've kept other monster fish, but not a dovai. So
yeah. So anyway, when I put this tank together, we have had, I think, 3 generations of dovais.
Okay.
In the 26 years, or maybe it's 2. Actually, let's go backwards. My first pair were in here after I moved to this house, but they were already about 10 years old.
Okay.
So they only were in here for a couple years before they passed. And then I had a second gen. So yeah, it's been 3 generations, but the first generation was only in here for a little while. The last pair I had, the female died maybe.
How big did the first generation get to, since they raised up in the 240?
Not anywhere near as big.
Okay.
The first generation male that I had was probably about the size of that guy in there. Which
this guy is big for a lot of people, but I know how big yours have been.
Yeah,
so.
He's probably, I don't know, I'm terrible at guesstimating, but I'm going to say that's 16, 18 inches.
Yeah, at least. I mean, he's big. Like.
And but he would be. He would fit under the fin of his daddy. It's really hard to describe just how big that last male I had was. When he died, I had measured him as 27 inches long, and if memory serves me right, he was 17 inches at his highest from the bottom to
That's
top.
nutty, because I had a fish that died, a Mabu puffer, and it was only 22 inches, but 27 inches, and the Mabu puffer was maybe like 6 inches tall, nowhere near 17 inches. Like, that's that fish. This fish here on end
Right.
is that fish. Like, that's a monster.
That's what makes the Dovai so impressive as they get older. It's not so much their length, which, of course, you don't see that many 2-foot-plus fish.
Right.
But when he stops growing that way, they just keep going.
And they're all muscle. That's the scariest part of them.
Yeah. He looked just like a giant head, basically, swimming around. And, of course, he had the big nuchal hump.
Uh-huh.
And when they were spawning, the canines on that fish were enormous. And
Any good, like, Dovai got after you story? Like, give you a wicked bad bite or anything?
some of my older videos, I have a couple videos where I just show when he was much younger and more responsive. I just show my fingers running along here, and that fish would be on that end of the tank, and I would estimate it was less than a second that he was here. There'd be water pouring out, the feeder holes would be flopping, and he was right there. And he would continually break his canines because he was always smashing into the plexiglass.
Yep.
So for a while, he was so aggressive that I had my wife hold the net when I cleaned the tank to keep him away from me.
Okay.
Especially if him and the female were spawning.
Mm-hmm.
Now the female Dovai females are also very aggressive, but mostly when they're guarding fry, like most other cichlids. And there can be stages where the female is a human torpedo. She is probably more aggressive than the male at some points.
Yeah, just pop the other fish's swim bladder or something like that,
exactly.
right?
A male is constantly aggressive, but the female generally was pretty much let the male guard the territory and stuff, but when she was threatened or felt her fry were threatened or something, she could be extremely aggressive. And the biggest female I had looked so little compared to the male. And when she died, I measured her and stuff, and she was 18 inches long.
Wow. And
it just looked like a feeder goldfish practically. I mean, the fish was enormous. I've had people over here over the years, and there's been people on some of the forums. I don't do the forums much anymore, but like Monster Fish Keepers and what have you. And when I posted videos years ago on a continual basis, they would always debate just how big that Dovai was. Some guys would say, "Oh, it's not anywhere near as big as they claim." And other people would say, "Oh, it's gigantic." But the only people that really knew when they came and they saw it for themselves, basically they always did the same reaction. The jaw would drop. And he could not fit in that cave when he got too big.
Wow, because that
was his cave. That was specifically made for him, and it got to the point where he could not completely fit into that cave. He would back into it, but his head and nuchal hump, he couldn't get in there anymore.
Because that's the craziest part is, even on camera right now, I know you guys are like, doesn't look that big, but in person, remember, so, if we put my hand next to this, it's tiny. Like, my hand is maybe 1/4 the way up. And then remember, this is 600 gallons. Like, this is a 600-gallon aquarium that it doesn't look that big. But if you were to put that same decoration into 180, you're going, that thing's 1/3 of the tank,
Exactly.
So that's the problem, is the scale here. I'm not used to looking at 600-gallon tanks, especially, a pair of them back to back, So it's the perspective, and I can see how Monster Fish Keepers, are poo-pooing you, going, it's not that big, blah, blah, blah. But in person, you're going, it's massive, So let's, what is actually in here? Because I've been showing the fish.
So when the Dovais passed, I took it as an opportunity to turn this into this is a northern South American tank.
Okay.
It's the fish that herald from Colombia and as far south as Peru. And I have a trio of species in here. These are probably other than Dovai, these are my 3 favorite species. You've got Feste, Ornatum, and Atromaculatum. And I've got 4 Festi in here, 3 females that you see swimming along here, and then the male is in that clay pot there.
Okay.
And then we've got back in the corner there, there's a male ornatum there, and the little gal right there is the female.
Okay.
These fish are only 3-4 inches. Maybe the Festa might be 5. I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
And then in the big hole there is a pair of ornatum, which Atromaculatum, which you might have trouble seeing because of the shadows in there. But they're the two biggest fish in the tank. The male is starting to grow pretty well. It actually just came out.
Yeah.
The male is there. The female has the orange on her, which is real faint at this point.
Oh.
But as the female develops, they get a very, very deep orange abdomen.
Okay.
And the redder and more orange it gets, the more likely that she is holding. And you can just start to see some of the traces of the orange at this point. So that's what's in here. And I will be adding one more species into this tank. In this little 40-gallon breeder are some really rare fish at the moment. It's Adenocara stalsbergi, which is the true green terror from Peru. And I had spawned these, so I guess these guys are maybe 2 months old now.
Okay.
And there's probably 100 or so in there. Most of them are hiding right now. Somewhere between 50 and 100, I don't know. And at this point, they're maybe 1.5 inches, did you say? Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I'd say 1.5 inches, 2 inches. I see, and this is I always find funny is talking to you. I think you're being modest about how big your fish actually are because people are so used to fighting you. Because some of these fish in here, I'm going, I don't know. I think it's more 6-7 inches more than 3 or 4. But people always think, oh, you're telling the tall tale. But if anything, you're underestimating how big your fish are because they're just monsters. Like, yeah, I'd say. The smallest ones in there probably 1.5 inches. The biggest 3 inches.
Okay.
So
anyway, so there's somewhere 50 or 100 of those, and I'm going to keep a dozen for myself, and they're going to eventually go in that tank.
Okay.
The green terrors do better in larger groups.
Okay.
Than some of the other northern South Americans. So I was going to put. I thought a dozen was fair game for this tank, but we'll see. It's going to be somewhere between 6 and 12, depending on.
I feel like you stock very lightly.
Yeah, I do stock lightly
for 600 gallons.
Yeah,
I mean, most people would shoehorn all this into their 180. They would, right?
Yeah, that's a problem. I like to keep it as natural as possible. I think the fish do better, and you're much more likely to see natural behavior and spawns. I'll get a group of fish spawning in one corner and another spawning behind the big driftwood back there, and maybe a third in the center. And you can see this pair of festi starting to color up.
Right.
And they actually get extremely colorful sometimes, but since we're standing here,
right, yeah.
That's kind of inhibiting their color. But you can even with us standing here, you can see that the female is starting to color, and I suspect they spend a lot of time in that clay pot. That's the reason I dropped these pots.
Yeah.
The clay pots are a new addition since the Dovi left.
It's a chew toy for that Dovi.
Yeah, it would be like. But for these fish, they're excellent for spawning spots. And so I put 3 pots because there's 3 different species in the tank. And then, of course, they may end up trying to spawn in the big, weird-shaped deal.
I'm actually shocked at how well this tank is lit for like how little lighting's being used. I mean, there's a couple lights along the back and then a couple in the ceiling, but it gives you that, I feel like I'm looking into a lake or river because you get all the shadows and
again, these fish do better with subdued lighting.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to recreate as best I can a natural environment for the fish.
Do you find when fish do spawn, are all the fry like totally eating on all the algae and stuff like that? So you're actually getting the actual how they would raise in the wild.
Some of these pots, as you can see, that one back there has got a lot of growth on it. And the driftwood has a little, and so they love. That's how they do real well in here, because once they spawn, and again, because it's, as you said, lightly stocked, the parents are able to kind of parade the fish through the tank, and they can go to where the algae is, and the other fish will go away, and they can kind of. It's a real thrill to see a pair of Dovi, or I keep saying Dovi, they're gone, a pair of like Festi or something like that, parading 500 little teeny fry through a tank like this.
I've seen some of the videos, and half the reason I fell in love with Dovi is watching your Dovi. So
That's my thing is for the hobby is I love to spawn these guys and just kind of watch how they take care of their fry and watch the as natural as I can get it. And of course, to do that, even though it's as you said, fairly lightly stocked tank, and you can see the female coloring up even more as we speak way down in the corner. I still do very, very heavy water changes.
And so, how much? How often?
Well,
I'm guessing this is to guess. I'm guessing this has some marking on there for water changes right here.
I'm pretty anal, and those tapes were designed for my Dovai.
Okay.
Because that Dovai was massive, and to truly appreciate the size of him, I guess you have to understand. It's easier to understand why I did so much water changes, but this represents 20% of the tank.
Okay.
When I was raising my Dovai and spawning them in here, that was a daily water change.
Wow.
And then this was twice a week.
20% of 600, what, 120 gallons a day?
Yeah, well, that's on the small days.
Right.
So this is 5 times a week.
Yeah.
This is 60%, which I did twice a week. So the Dovais had daily water changes of a minimum of 20%.
Right.
And 60% twice a week.
So that's like, just off the top of my head, it's like 1,000 gallons of water going through this 600 gallon every week.
Yes.
Yeah, so, wow.
And now with much smaller fish, I have scaled that back.
Sure.
For now. As they grow, so basically at this point now it's 1 time a week.
Okay.
So we do a 20 and a 60.
Yep.
And that's more than adequate, considering I've got fairly light population, and I've got 4 Eheims running on the tank as well.
Wow, I didn't realize it was 4 because I saw a couple, but 4. I mean, it makes sense. It's 600 gallons.
Two of the ones there. There's one there, and then under here is one of these guys.
Oh, one of the big boys. Yeah. I just got one of those. It's still in the box. I haven't set it up yet, but yeah, I'm excited to play with one of those too.
Yeah. So maintenance is I think a key if you really want to raise the fish and make them look their best, and you got to do the water changes and you got to do the maintenance.
Well, you're a fish keeper unlike me, because I feel like I have to own all fish and play with them all, and I feel like you play with very few, but in a way that most people don't. And that's, like no one's got tanks this big and water change. Like I automate it, but even I don't think I'd automate 1,000 gallons through this tank every week. I'd probably go, 80% over the course of the week would be enough for me, and that's less than 600 gallons at that point. So,
yeah. Well, yeah, I probably a little off the deep end, but so anyway, that's that tank.
And then we've got, let's just look at the other 600 gallon.
Yeah, and this was the same deal where the 20%. Now this tank, I actually did more water changes than I did on the Dovai tank.
Wow.
At a certain time in a point in time, because I had upwards to 70 red devils in here.
Wow, okay.
And they were 12 to 18 inch red devils. These were big fish. And
I'm sure you got videos on that?
Yeah, there's some
I'll
videos.
have to go look at that because I haven't seen
There's
that.
a few videos of some of them, but not when they were like crazy big.
Sure.
But anyway, so it was the same deal. And this one represented 80%. So I was doing 20, 60, and then I went a little further with those because there was just so many. It was such a crowded tank. Now I'm back to where I'm just doing this once a week and this once a week. As the Dovai gets bigger, that will change.
How old is that Dovai in particular, roughly?
That Dovai is about not quite 2 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the last remaining fry, if you will, of my last male.
Right, because that's huge for. I mean, it's the tank and the water changes and the food and the care, but to me, I think most people, like, if I had to guess, that fish is like 18 inches and it's huge and it's only 2 years old. I feel like most people get to like 8 to 10 inches the first year, and then maybe 14 inches by year 2, and 4 inches, that's a lot of extra fish.
Yeah, he's well taken care of, and he gets to eat a lot of fry because in the corner, which I don't know if you'll be able to. Oh, actually, the male is in that clay pond.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But there is a pair of chanchos that continually spawn in this corner, and they always get to about the size of these green terrors.
Yeah.
And then the dovie snacks on them. And, we're talking a significant number of fry. They tool along eating grunge off of this big piece of driftwood and the rock, eat various rocks. You can see the algae and whatever. Here he comes out. He can barely get out of that.
Yeah.
But usually, if you in this little very corner, they always dig a. You'll see there's no gravel.
Oh yes, that's the spawning site back there.
That's the spawning site.
Yeah.
And that means they're getting ready again because they dug the spot. Usually, when they put fry back there, it looks like a mound of sand about yay high, and that's all fry.
Wow, because it's like 5,000 at a time or something like that,
Something
or
like
yeah.
that, yeah. So, and the red devils that I have left, as you can see, they're pretty shy. They're not as shy as they appear right now, but again,
well, we've been in and out of here,
yeah.
and we moved a tank, and there's, we've been.
But I think maybe I have a half a dozen of them now, and they're in the females are probably 7 inches, males maybe 8 to 10 or something. I don't know.
This is just nutty. I mean, I do this at my own store where I'm like, oh yeah, here's the side of my tank. It's 4 feet, but I only have 2 feet, so you've got that extra 6 inches, and 6 inches makes it seem so much bigger to me.
It does.
I mean, your tank's longer. I only am 6 foot long, but that extra 6 inches is blowing my mind. Just like this thing's huge.
Yeah, these have been real good tanks for me.
Yeah, I just, I don't know if I'm more impressed by the fish, the size of tanks, or how long you've been dedicated to the same fish. Like, I don't have a tank that's 26 years old or something like that. I mean, that's crazy.
Well, and you had mentioned the species, and I have, I've been doing this for a really long time. So I have, over the years, I doubt if there's any what used to be called a cyclosoma that I haven't.
Yeah.
I've got pictures all over the place of various fish that I've kept, like Patenia splendida, and over there's a really rare one. This is, at the time was Cyclosoma longimanus. I believe it's Therichthyes longimanus. I don't think it's in the hobby anymore. I've had parrot cichlids, the real parrot cichlids.
Yeah, true parrot. Yeah.
People go, oh God. Yeah, in fact, there's one of the.
Oh yeah.
There's one right there. That was a little guy that I had years ago. They turned out to be monsters too. But you talk about a fish that's hard to keep. That fish is, in my opinion, that was the hardest fish I've ever had to keep.
Really?
And that was because it comes from the Amazon rainforest. The water is as acidic as it can possibly be. It's the brown water.
Okay.
The pH is in the 5s.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, water out of my tap is like mid-6.
Yep.
And it tends to become more acidic, so I can get it down.
Yeah, we've got no buffering capacity out of the tap, so yeah.
So it gets to 6 pretty easy, but even 6 is not
6 is still a long way from 5.
Yeah. And so you're talking massive amounts of peat. I did water changes on that thing sometimes twice a day.
Wow.
To keep him from getting hole in the head. Because if you stop doing water changes like twice a day, they would develop hole in the head. And you would start to see the pits. And this, again, we're talking, I think I had those late 70s maybe.
Sure. So you're like, I would think in the 70s, you're almost pioneering this species.
Yeah, it was, I when I joined the American Cichlid Association in 73, I think it was, it had only been around for about 6 years. And I got to know one of the founders, Guy Jordan, really well. Of course, he was famous for having Pablo, which was his big dove.
Yeah.
Very, very well-known fish. Anyway, so Guy was able to, at the time, even then, the ACA, which is called the American Cichlid Association, we used to joke because it was really the African Cichlid Association.
It kind of still is.
Yeah, because all they did was Tanganyikans and, Malawis and what have you. So I was kind of the nut that joined the ACA that started to steer it towards Central Americans. And in fact, for a while, I published a spin-off of the BB, which was called Cyclosoma Power.
Okay.
And we did that for a couple of years, my wife and I, and sent it out with the old Mimeo and stuff. This is way before faxes and all that stuff. And I gave it up after a couple of years because I was too busy with my career and then doing all these tanks and raising my son. And anyway, but the publication went on for about 10 years. So that helped develop an interest in the ACA for cyclosomas and other American fish. So I feel like I was partially responsible, at least for getting people interested in the dovis and the umbies of the world and that sort of thing.
I know it's had an impact on me alone, so I can be a testament to I saw your fish way before I ever knew who you were or where you were. Like you were just, you could have been in Maine for all I knew at that point, So
anyway, but my point was I do have a limited number of species now, and it's because I've always kept a minimal number, but I kind of evolved from, I kept all of the little, the convicts, the sahikas, all those guys, and all the firemouth type fish, and the Robertsoni's, and I mean, there's, like I said, intermedium. There was just so many. Simspilum, maculicata, macrocanthum, all these things. So over the years, I have developed the ones that I really like, and I know which ones I like the best, and so now as I've gotten a little older, I just keep what I like, and whether they're rare or
tanks,
not,
but bigger tanks.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of what's going on in this room.
Was this the first room? Did this fish room happen before the other room we're going to?
I kicked my wife out of the garage for cars about in 2008.
Okay.
This was when we moved into this house in the early 80s. I specifically had to buy a house that had a big enough garage to do what I wanted. This wall didn't exist then. That wall was put up. We put the fish tanks in here first. That's my commitment to the tanks. I knew once I put them in here, they were here as long as I was, because then we built the wall.
Yeah.
Because you can't get them out of here. I'll probably be buried in one of them.
There you go.
My casket is probably what it'll be. So anyway, but that's this was the first room. It expanded into that room, which now I've shut down.
Yeah.
And then when my son graduated from high school, that's been, I don't know. I don't see. He's 41 now, so was that 23 years ago? I took his room over too, and that's where I had 180 and 135 and several other little tanks.
All the small tanks.
Yeah, all the small tanks, which raise fry, and that's where the convicts would be, and the firemouse, and fish like that. Which a 180-gallon tank is very sufficient for convicts and sahikas, and
I would say plenty.
Yeah.
That's
but it's really, in a sense, it's on par. It's about the same scale.
It's proportional. Yeah,
proportional.
Yeah.
So this is where it started, and then I expanded out into the garage.
Let's go to the next room here. It's just right through a doorway, and if you can believe it, they're bigger. There's a bigger tank in here.
Two littler ones and a bigger one.
Yep. So there's two little ones. We'll start there. We're gonna save this giant one over here for last. So what size are these two? Seems like good things come in pairs here.
Yeah. Actually, I got these at the same time. These are two 270-gallon tanks.
Okay. And what kind of dimensions are on these?
They're 6 long, 2 feet tall, and 3 feet wide. 3 feet wide, 2 feet tall, 6 feet long. And in here, I've got my again ornatum, which I'm really proud of. This guy, he has started to grow like a rocket. That's a male. And again, my guess size-wise is 8-9 inches.
Easy, yeah.
And then I've got 3 younger Atromaculatum in there, and then the massive old female. She is pushing a decade old.
Wow.
And she's probably in that same 10-inch range, I guess. And then we've got a pair, this is where my spawning Adenocara Stalsbergi have spawned over the years. That's the female there, and the male over there. And like I was telling you before we started filming, I don't know as if I'll get any more spawns in this tank, because the ornatum, as this male ornatum has gotten bigger, he has now turned to dominant fish in this tank. And he has kind of broken up the pair bond between the male and female of the Peruvian green terror. As you can see, the male's got some bite marks on him and what have you. So
yeah, he's been doing battle.
Yeah, so I'm hoping that they will adjust. Sometimes if you leave them alone, that will just
Work it out themselves.
work it out themselves. It's a big enough tank to where they should be able to. There's plenty of height eases, but if they don't, then the green terrors will end up in that 600-gallon tank that has the festi and what have you in them.
Sure.
So I don't want them to get
Too rare of a fish.
yeah,
so,
too rare fish. They're too gorgeous. I don't want them to get harmed, but I'd prefer that they stayed in here.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll give them another few weeks and see if they can kind of settle their issues. And I've had situations before where it seemed like it was dire, and I just held out a little longer, and then those magically they just kind of got used to each other, established their pecking order, and things went back to normal. I've had other situations where they don't.
Right.
So that's kind of to me, one of the fun things about the hobby is the fish behavior, and never knowing for sure. Everybody always asks me, well, what's the number one thing about fish that you can say? I say the number one thing is there is no number one thing. There is no hard and fast rules, because there's things that seem to make the most sense, but they don't always work. And sometimes you can get a rogue fish that's normally a very passive species, and it'll just be the nastiest thing you've ever found. And you can also get an extremely passive dovie. The odds are not strong on that,
Right.
but it happens.
Always an exception to the rule.
There's always an exception to the rule. So anyway, that's what's this 270. And then in this 270, I've got a community of the solanum that we talked about. There's many generations in here. You can see adult pairs and then little 2-3 inchers, and
Even the small ones look good. Like they remind me of like a geophagus or something almost when they're this small.
yeah, when these guys are spawning, the females, you can't unless you see them in person, it just doesn't do justice to them. They are just intensely jewelly. It's just they get this intense red in their abdomen. Their face kind of turns emerald green, and they've got all kinds of blue sequins, and it's just a gorgeous fish. That female down there is like getting that way a little. You can see she's got a little black on her. That's from fighting with another female for territory, but even there, that's not anywhere near the color that she will have when she is actually spawning, which I'm guessing is probably week or so, who knows. There's no little guy coming out from over there. So this is supposed to be a single species tank, but there is one little red devil in there.
Yeah.
And I was telling you the story a little bit about that, but just briefly, that red devil isn't supposed to be in there. He was spawned in the last tank that we'll be looking at, and this last tank over here has a sump, and some of the fry had tumbled into the sump. And apparently, unbeknownst to me, of course, and we're living in the sump. Now, because this tank is so big, the sump alone is almost 200 gallons. So it's a lot of space for some fry. And as I was cleaning out the sump with one of my old Eheim hobby pumps, it got clogged, and I went to see what the problem was, and it turned out it was a little red devil of maybe an inch or so that had gotten into the impeller. And I thought the poor little guy was dead or close to it, so I quickly shut off the pump and tried to get him out of the impeller. And he was a little mangled up, but he wasn't, it wasn't
still alive.
He was still alive. So I knew if I put him back in the one tank, one of those jaguars would eat him. So I figured his best bet would be to throw in here. These are not predatory. The Solanum are very much vegetarian. They love eating spinach and peas and what have you, so they're not big on eating other fish. I put him in there, and he kind of just sort of sank to the bottom. And I thought, oh, well, we'll see what happens. By the next day, he was swimming around, and he's now doing great. He's growing, and I'm going to have to move him out of there, because once he gets a little bit bigger, then he'll be a threat to those fish. So then he'll go back where he belongs. By then he won't get eaten, but it's kind of funny how fish end up in another tank when you don't mean to sometimes. Anyway, that brings us to the last one.
So this tank, I got to back up to even get all of it in there.
Hard to do.
So what are the dimensions first? Like,
this tank is 10 feet long.
So yeah, we're looking at 10 feet that way.
54 wide.
54 wide. That's even more than 4 feet.
4.5.
4.5 feet.
And 3 feet tall.
Wow. So yeah, that means this is 3 feet by 4.5 feet. 4.5 feet's got to be one of the widest I've ever seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was.
Because the panel you cut to make that has got to be a 9-foot panel.
This is inch, I believe it's inch thick
Yeah, it looks like it.
acrylic.
You know, even the acrylic, I can just fall in love with looking beautiful acrylic. But, you know, let's look at some of the fish in here, like this guy. Let's start with this jaguar. Like, here's my hand, right? If he'll come up front here.
He probably will.
Like, that's my hand, you know, and he's probably at least twice as long as my hand. The camera perspective is not right here, but twice as long and, like, as tall as my hand. He is thick, like, thick. And how old is this guy?
He's probably the oldest fish I have right now. He's over a decade. I'm going to say he's probably 11, 12 years old.
Okay. And that's his wife there?
That is the female, and there is another male that's hiding in one of these giant clay pots somewhere in here. But yeah, they've been around.
Easily biggest jaguar I've ever seen. Like, I've seen him maybe as long, but not as tall.
Yeah, and again, like I was telling you before, that's the same way that the Dovi was, you know, my big one.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, he's not anywhere. It's a similar thing where he gets taller as he gets older, but the Dovi was just even more so. So, and in here we have a pair of citronellum, and he's probably a foot, I guess.
Yeah. Is that, so I'm way out of my element here. Is that what we also call a Midas cichlid? Is that?
Yeah, that's a Midas.
But not the barred Midas or anything like that.
No, it's just a regular old
Yep.
Midas cichlid. There's females in the cave, and then we've got a trio of umbies. That female umbies, you can see the one female there is the dominant fish of the three.
Okay.
And they've kind of pinned, even in this tank this big.
Yeah.
She's pinned up in the corner.
The thing is massive, because I'm sitting in a chair right now, and I have to look up at this tank, and you keep looking up, because it's like I'm in a movie theater, how big it is, because you can pan, you can do the slow pan from right, and you can just keep going left, and you're like, oh, there's a giant fish, and you keep panning, like, oh, more giant fish, and the decorations are huge. Like, some of these decorations, if that's 3 feet tall, that's a 2-foot, hide, cave, that's 2 feet tall, back in the corner there, and massive overflows. Yeah, and you can see the filtration down here is, that's, how long is that? 6 feet?
Yeah, it's a 6 foot.
6 foot sump?
Yeah.
Like that's. I can see why you have chairs in each of the rooms. Like in my fish room, I don't really have chairs. I have some rolling stools.
Yeah.
But it's because I have lots of small tanks, whereas big tanks, I could see how you just, I'm going to sit down and watch this.
Yeah, right. That's exactly what I do. I just pick a tank and watch, and then that chair spins so I can spin around to, the other ones if I want to kind of check out the other.
I love the natural algae growth and how it's just waving. Like I really feel like it's the bottom of a lake or a river. It's like it's so natural.
Yeah. Well, part of that is the age. You let it, the longer it sits.
How long have you had this tank?
This tank since 2008. So.
Okay, so 8 years old.
Yeah, but it's enough time. I mean, it's.
Yeah. Just finished this cycle last year.
Yeah.
And so, what kind of water change is going on this thing?
Well,
so it's I don't know if we said it. This is 1,000 gallons, by the way.
Yeah. And there's the tape for that.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's a sump-oriented system instead of the canisters, I've been able to get away with just one a week.
Okay.
And so that represents...
Is that 400 gallons you're changing?
That's about 400
it looked at about 60%, so 400 gallons a week. And then, do you do all the tanks the same day, or?
No,
Okay, so every day is kind of a different...
you said, I told you that I'm usually free at 2.
Okay, yep.
That's my schedule.
All right.
In the mornings, I'm doing fish tanks every day. One of the tanks.
Because, I was thinking, well, you got to...
It takes a while. I can drain them really fast.
Uh-huh.
But I've never figured out a way to fill them any faster than my water supply will allow me to. I've got a sump built in over here.
Okay.
A plumber put in. It's got a sump in the ground. So they dug a hole about 8 feet down.
Okay.
And the water goes down into there to a sump pump, and then it pumps it out into the sewer.
Oh, that's nice.
So I can drain this tank 15, 20 minutes.
Nice.
And it takes a couple hours to fill it up.
Right, and so I want to ask this question because I think I know the answer, but are you a hot water or cold water change guy?
It's cold water for me
Okay.
because there is no way. I've got a 65-gallon water heater. Now, in the dead of winter,
Uh-huh.
I do mix some cold, some hot,
Okay.
because I can't justify, if I'm doing a 60% water change, for example,
Yeah.
in a 600-gallon tank,
Would drop
that
it.
drops the temperature like 15 degrees.
And what temps do you kind of run on? Maybe some of these tanks or most of these tanks? Or?
They're all in the same range, but depending on whether I'm spawning or not,
Uh-huh.
I will increase the temperature a little bit if I'm trying to get the fish to spawn. But for the most part, these fish are running at 78 degrees.
And then,
And then in the winter,
Yep, go ahead.
In the winter, what I do is I drop the temperature by I don't have heaters in these tanks.
okay.
Per se. The lights give them enough heat, and the insulation is far enough to ground. It's basically always 65 degrees down here, more or less. And with the insulation of the acrylic, the temperature doesn't change that much. When you're talking about 1,000 gallons of water, it takes a lot to move that.
Right.
So I've been able to get away with cold. That's kind of where I ended up with that, because at that amount of water, cold water, I could do it without making the temperature drop too dramatically. It'll drop a few degrees, but it goes, gets basically right back up. But in the winter, the tanks that I purposely do let them go down a couple degrees.
Almost creating like a seasonality to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
I want them to get down to where in the winter they're maybe 70, 72 for a couple of months, because it's good for the fish. It mimics
probably mellows them out a bit too.
Well, it helps the fish recognize their seasons, and they do spawn much better. It's kind of like plants. My wife's a big gardener.
Okay.
And a lot of the stuff that she does for plants, I've tried for fish, just through trial and error, and some of it works, and some of it doesn't. But one of the things that a lot of people do, like for roses, for example, if you want to get spectacular rose bushes in the summer, sometimes in the winter, a lot of people will cover them and stuff. You're better off sometimes if in Seattle, not if you're living in Alaska where you're going to freeze them to death. But if you let them get a little stressed, they will do better, and they'll produce better blooms. And I found the same thing maybe for fish.
All right.
That it's better. And again, we're talking these kinds of cichlids.
Right.
Now, if you're doing neons or something that, you probably don't want to do that. But these, for the most part, the Central American and Northern South American fish that I keep are very tough. And they require good food and water changes. And if you do those two things, they'll probably respond.
And so what do you feed on average? I'm sure it's a variety, but quick little overview of is it pellets, is it prepared, is it?
It's all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
The main food that everybody gets is the jumbo krill.
Okay.
Which I soak. It's freeze dried, and I soak it. So every morning I take a cup. It's about yay big, and a handful of krill. I just kind of do it by.
Sure.
Over the years, it's like I can't tell you how much it is, but it's a handful. And I soak it for about 10 minutes. Got to soak it because you need to get all the moisture back in it and stuff. And then I just drop them in the various tanks. The big fish, obviously, eat them whole. The smaller fish, I'd break them up, and they'll eat little bits and pieces of it. So they get that every morning. Then there's a couple different pellets that I use. I'm a big fan of Dianichi.
Okay.
I have a Color Supreme pellet. It's a clay-coated pellet. It's really good for digestion, and it's good for color. So I use that every other day, along with my, I don't want to say cheap food, but my bulk food, if you will, is Hikari BioGold Plus.
Okay.
Which I also feed every other day to these fish. Then I've got some New Life Spectrum that I use on occasion. And of course, I feed some of the more, like the jags, the dovi, what have you, they get a lot of fry.
Okay.
that get spawned and nobody wants, and they end up in the bellies of the fish.
Sure.
And I take spinach and microwave it just a little bit, so it's not super tough. And I've got those leaf lettuce clips, the little sucker things, and those are primarily for the Islanum. I do feed some to the Ornatums, Festae, some of the northern South Americans, the green terrors. That's not every day. That's like once a week or so. And then also every now and then, believe it or not, I take pears.
Huh. I've never heard of that.
A lot of the northern South American cichlids live in riverine systems that have fruit that decays and falls into the rivers. And most of them end up munching on that stuff.
I see.
So I've taken, I've tried various fruits over the years, and the one that seems to be taking the best, and this is like once a month.
Sure.
This is a treat, if you will. Certainly wouldn't do it all the time, but like when pear season is out and they're really ripe, and they're real soft, I take one of those and I'll chop up a few hunks and throw them in, and the fish just love it.
I've never heard that, but now I got to try it. That's
And I think that's probably my secret. My last. Again, that's very, very, very infrequent. But and if you get like some species, again, none of the species I keep now. Actually, when they get bigger, the Ornatums and the Festae would probably be very interested in the pears. But fish like Simspilum, Melanurum, Psittacum, all of those Theraps type fish, they go nuts.
That's so counterintuitive to what I would just think, but I believe it.
Fruits and seeds.
Yeah.
So I've known people that actually will feed some of them sunflower seeds. I haven't done that myself. But they, again, because of the way their environment is, some of the rivers that have the fruit falling into it and their seeds, and they just, it's a natural food for them to eat. Now they're eating mangoes, but I don't have mangoes readily available. Pears are cheap, and they seem to do the trick.
Yeah.
And so that's. I don't think. I think that's about it as far as.
Okay, and then my next question, for all the tanks being this old, they're so minor, like not scratched. How do you keep the algae off the front and clean them without? I mean, when some of these tanks are 26 years old, and yet I would say the average hobbyist, it looks like they've owned them for less than a year.
Well, I just, I don't know. I use, I'm pretty tall, so I'm able to, just get in there with, well, this one I need a ladder. The other ones I don't, but this one's so damn tall that I need a ladder to get into it. But I just use,
like little white pads or something?
No,
or,
I use stuff that probably most people don't. This is
well, that's why I asked the
a
question.
squeegee with a sponge on it.
Oh.
For cleaning car windshields.
Yep.
And that's what I use. And it's very soft. And I just dip it in the water. And you can, it's just a sponge, right?
Yeah.
And I just.
That makes sense.
And it's, it's got enough. You can see that there's not enough. It's not porous enough to where it'll even the sand will get in.
Up,
And I just, just try to be careful and use the sponge. And if you wipe it down with this, 2-3 times a week, the stuff doesn't build up.
Sure.
Now, some of it I've tried to build up. I'm trying to get the pieces of algae to kind of grow in these cracks and stuff. The fish love to eat on it. And I think it looks kind of cool when you can get some of it.
Yeah.
This one here has been my best. Right here. You can see how it's grown over the years. And so I try to do it on some of the plants that I've got I've got algae that's growing on there, and they really love snacking on that sometimes. And again, these are just plants that my wife grows outside, and some of them do well in water, and so I stick them in, and because you can't really keep your typical aquarium plants with these fish. They'll rip it to heck, and
especially if they're some are wanting to eat veggies and
and the plants are too expensive to get any. So I've just tried a few house plants and stuff, and even if they're just on top, it helps to give the fish sort of a calming sense when they have these things over them. So it's not like people are because most fish don't like stuff above them, or I mean,
Right.
below. They're below, like because that's birds,
Predators,
prey.
yeah. Yeah.
And so if you can put stuff on top of the tank that's not too heavy, I mean, those are in pots, so I can easily
Right.
move them. When I clean the tank, I put them over here, and I put them back over there. So I do that to help try to calm them down. That's about it.
Well, I've got one last question for you, and what's the holy grail fish that if I could get them, I would make space for that in my fish room right now?
Well, it's always been the same fish for me.
Okay.
It would be a true red doveye.
I didn't even know such a thing existed. So
Yeah, I've been on a quest for that. I've talked about that a little over the years, but a true red doveye in Lake Nicaragua. There is a very rare number of dovies that are red or orange, like the red devils.
Okay.
And in fact, the very first doveye that came into the hobby in the mid '60s was red.
Wow.
And when it came into the hobby, it was at about the same time that all of the Lake Nicaragua stuff had been discovered. So all the red devils, all of the Midas, all these orange red fish were coming in. And when it first came in, it was confused with those. They thought it was a red devil because it was orange.
Right.
And it came from Nicaragua, but it was the wrong shape. So finally, they figured out what it was, and it ended up. I'm getting old. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. There's an article in Old Aquarium Journal magazine. I think it's 64 or something. That talks about him. And anyway, he got the doveye when they finally figured out what it was, and he named it Charlene. Or excuse me, I'm getting the story wrong. See, I'm getting old. He named it Charlie because he male doveye. Then it laid eggs about a year later, so he had to change the name to Charlene because it turned out to be a female. But that was the very first doveye in the hobby that was red.
Wow.
And there's never been another one, to the best of my knowledge. And I looked high and low to try to get one.
Right.
The closest I got was, gosh, when was this? Maybe a decade or so ago. One of the local fish stores here in Seattle, and I can't remember the name of the store at the time. I think it was called Fish Factory. It was Kevin.
Okay.
Kevin worked at a store before he owned the one in Burien, and I believe it was called Fish Factory. I can't remember. Anyway, he called me one day and he said, "I've been told that Don Conkle has a red doveye that he caught when he was down in Lake Nicaragua. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Kevin, did you need to call me about this?"
Yeah.
He goes, "It's pricey." I said, "Kevin, I don't care what it is. I'll take it." And, well, as is Conkle prone to do, I think it was more hope than reality.
Right.
And it never came to fruition. I was supposed to get it a couple weeks later. I was just so excited. I was actually planning a tank just for that fish. And Kevin had to call me and say, he said it's going to come next week. And then it was, it's going to come next week. And then after a few weeks like that, you knew it wasn't really happening. Then he claimed that it had, he had it in one of his vats in his fish farm in Florida, and the vat had broke, and the fish had died. So who knows? But that was the closest I ever got. So really, I never got that close. But there has been some kind of golden hybrids that have been around and stuff, but not a pure red one. I have a picture of the original red one. I did it was in the old ACA slide tape program, and I went through that, I don't know what year it was, late 70s, and kind of redid it for them and got the right species names and what have you. And they had a picture of the old Charlene fish. So I made a copy of it. So I've got a copy of that fish. But that's as close as I ever got to it. But other than that, there isn't really a species. I've had probably 100, 150 different species of Central and South American cichlids over the 35, 40 years I've done this. And I pretty much had them all by now.
Sure.
Another one, I guess, if thinking back, if I could get it again, and it hasn't been in the hobby forever, is I believe it's now Heracles steindoctori. At the time, it was Cyclosoma steindoctori. But that is a predatory fish from the Rio Pinoco river system. It's where the Bartonis and all the labradens and all those things. So there's a bunch of little fish in there that are all very similar. And one of the fish that is in that group is a predator, and it's steindoctori. And I had the pleasure of having one of those mid-'80s or so, and I only had the one, and it was a male, and he was in one of my big tanks for about 6-7 years before he passed. It's the only one I've ever seen. He was a pretty cool fish. So I guess I would, if somebody said, hey, I've got some steindoctoris available, I might have to make room for that.
I see.
Geez, a Krausei is a great fish, Pictoboli, Meyersei. But I've had all of them so many times.
Sure.
It's just...
Well, I asked the question because you get to find out about a red dove I didn't know about. You know, you figure out, okay, what's this guy still pining after?
Yeah, and that would be it. If I ever could actually have, he would be in here.
Okay.
That would be a magnificent way to cap off the hobby.
Sure.
But, I don't think that's probably going to happen now, so it's fun to have maybe one that I didn't quite ever get to see.
Sure. Yeah.
But I'm pretty happy with how, hobby's been great. I've met a lot of people and spawned a lot of fish and learned all kinds of cool stuff. And I still love it. I don't have like I said, the smaller tanks anymore. As I've gotten a little older, me and my wife want to travel, and it's really hard to get somebody to be willing to babysit.
Yeah, raising fry and just feeding big fish are two different things. Yeah.
And so we took a 2-week vacation here in July. It was the first time I've been gone from my fish for that long for probably 10 years. Okay. Since my son moved out. Yeah. And because when he was here, at least, I could pay him a little bit. He knew he grew up in this stuff, so and that was the only way I could justify taking a couple weeks, as my son lives in New York now, and he flew back here to take care of my fish, so I could go on vacation for a couple weeks. So me and my wife went away for a couple weeks, and he was only willing to do it when I told him I had shut down all the little tanks. He only had to deal with the real big ones. So that's kind of one of the reasons I've kind of started to get out of it a little bit.
Sure.
But, I'll probably never drop any further than what you see here.
Yeah, I mean they're permanent fixtures. I mean, they move, but it's like, well, pretty sure once you buy 1,000-gallon tanks, 600-gallon tanks, they're sticking around. Yeah,
they don't go anywhere. I couldn't move this one if I tried anyway. Yeah, it's incredibly heavy, but it was worth it. This whole setup wasn't all that different from buying a small new automobile, but I didn't need a car. I don't, this was kind of the dream tank that I had, and I figured I was getting a little older at the time, and I could see myself sitting in front of this until I was 80 years old or whatever amount of time I get, sitting in that chair listening to some music and watching these fish. So it's a really fun hobby, and if you amortize it over all the years, it's not that expensive.
Well, that's just it. I mean, once you truly love something, and if you've got 30 years behind you already on fish, you go, well, I'm going to have a much longer time. It's, you don't have to worry like, oh, maybe I'll get bored of it. You've got a track record.
Right. I would be surprised if I got bored with them now at this point. But anyhow, so that's about it.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, your hobby with everyone else. And I know you've got the channel, and I'll make sure I link it so other people can check it out, because I know there's going to be lots of other videos and fish that we didn't get to look at today that, aren't in the tanks anymore, and they've, and some of the stories you told will be in videos, like people can search for it.
But, I haven't done as many videos as I used to, and that's mostly because I used to have so many more fish. Sure. There's only so many times I can show dovies and jaguars and stuff, so I don't do them much anymore, but every now and then I still get emails like, do another video, so I'll put something out, but I don't do it as regular as I used to do. So unless there's something I can think of that's
something worth, you know,
Yeah,
worth
yeah,
that you
I
already
mean-
haven't documented. You
Yeah,
know, that
right.
becomes
I
the
just don't
problem.
have
Is
that
I've done a
much
video
else.
on that.
Yeah, I don't have that much else I can tell
Mhm.
anybody.